Hey there! Welcome to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock, hard rock, heavy metal, and other forms of rock music. So today it's Friday Night Live Experience, and we got, I think, a very special concert for you tonight. Yes, we're talking about the Beatles, live at Shea Stadium. If you have not seen this concert, you must see it. Anybody who calls himself a rock fan has to see this concert. It's not that it's the best concert of all time, or it has the best guitar, or the best keyboards, or it's long, or there's some extraordinary thing about it. But there is some extraordinary thing about it, but it's just a timeless classic. There are so many elements here at work. First of all, nobody had done a concert of this size at this point in time. And it was pretty obvious because they had such a small stage setup with these small amps and small noise, and the crowd was just as loud as any place I've ever heard. The girls were screeching. It was like insanely loud. The other thing about it is that you had so many police that were so visible because people were trying to get, I don't know what they were trying to get, like, were they going to mob the stage and tear their clothes off? I don't know, man. A couple girls they showed passing out, girls screaming at the top of their lungs. And then they brought the Beatles out in a, I'm going to say it was a Chevy Impala, but it might not be. It looked like an Impala to me, but it could be something else. Anyways, they did a 10 song set. And you know what's so interesting about this is how rock and roll was still in its infancy and still evolving, because you know they were still doing things that big bands did, and crooners would do in the 40s and 50s, where they would sing and then they would bow, or they would introduce every single song, and then acknowledge every single thing. You don't see that as much now. They just go from one song to the next. There's no bowing except for usually at the end. But anyways, it had a lot of those elements in it. You see them all playing their instruments. So anyways, I don't want to explain too much more into it. Just so basically, it's the Beatles at Shea Stadium. I think they had blocked off part of the stadium, so you're probably looking at about 20,000 people. That was huge in those time period. They certainly weren't set up to get their music out, because I'm pretty sure that if you were in the crowd, you weren't hearing nothing. Not a thing. The only reason we hear anything is because the vocals were right up close. The recording equipment was right up close. Okay, of course, you all know who the Beatles are. I don't know they really need an introduction, but I'll give them one anyways. Paul McCartney on bass and lead vocals. George Harrison on lead guitar. John Lennon on lead vocals, rhythm guitar, and some piano. And then, of course, Ringo Starr on the drums, sitting up high, up high above the all, so that everybody gets a good view of them, So anyways, basically, each of the Beatles, at least Paul and John did all the introductions. So I'm going to, as I do the song, I'll tell you who introduced it and who played what and who did what on the song. They did some really good classics here, and then some stuff that I would think is a little more obscure. Maybe at that time period, those were big songs, but a little bit more obscure in the era. So you think about it, this is back 55 years ago. It still carries very well. I mean, I know that Pete Townsend once said that the Beatles made great albums. Maybe the Who didn't make as great albums, but we would blow them away live. Yeah, maybe that's true. Maybe on most nights they would, but I just found the energy on this particular concert very high energy. All four guys seemed to be so lively and like right into it, seeming to have fun, especially towards the end when you see George and John are laughing up a storm, and I think they're kind of giggling with each other over there in the corner. Anyway, so we're gonna start out. They're driven onto stage, or the car comes out. They get out of the car and they go to the stage. Everybody's just blitzkrieging on the screaming part, and they're waving and nodding and trying to get and say stuff, but you can't hear nothing. You just can't. So they get up on stage. Pretty much, they're set up. Like most bands, every member of the band in most bands has his position on the stage that he pretty much stays in. There's a few bands where certain people wander around and are never really where they're supposed to be. But with these guys, it's all pretty much a setup. You got Paul McCartney if you're facing the stage, he'd be on the left side. John Lennon on the right side, George Harrison center, and of course Ringo on the drums. There are some switch arounds here for different songs, but pretty much that's the basic setup for them. Okay, so it starts out with the first song, which is introduced by Paul. It's called Twist and Shout, one of their classics. John Lennon on lead, and of course George and Ringo doing the backing vocals for this. I'm gonna need my glasses because my notes are a little bit small for this, so I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. And so anyways, they do this song and then they start their bowing. They bow at the end of the song, all of them. It's just and they do this after every single song, which you just don't see as much in the modern era, because let's face it, in this time period when these were coming out, there wasn't a lot of they kind of set the standard for most bands that came after. Other bands were performing too, but they were the standard setters. Some people would say this is the greatest rock band in history. I personally think Led Zeppelin was, and of course I'm more of a Rush fan than I'm a Beatles fan, but you cannot deny the impact of this band. Okay, number 2, the second song, I Feel Fine, introduced again by Paul, and again John is on lead vocals. He has one of those really distinguishable voices. To me, sometimes I'm listening to a song on a CD by them or on the radio, and I'm saying to myself, that could be Paul, or that could be George. But John Lennon is John Lennon. You cannot miss his voice. The third song out of the gate is introduced this time by John. He takes the introduction, and it's Dizzy Miss Lizzie, and he also does the lead. But you have you have Paul in the background singing as well, but you also have a bit of a lead guitar bit here by George Harrison, which is pretty nifty. He wasn't a flashy guitar player. He didn't do these long drawn out guitar solos, and of course they're not a heavy metal band and they're not really a hard rock band. This is just a pop. At this point in time, they're basically a pop rock band. I mean, they become more psychedelic as years go on, and the music gets heavier, and the lyrics get deeper, and the music gets more involved, But at this point in time, they're a pop rock band. So there's not these long-winded guitar solos like you would normally see. Okay, the fourth song is introduced by Paul. It's Ticket to Ride, a song that I personally like quite a bit. John doing the lead, and Paul and John together doing the chorus. So basically, Paul moves from the left side of the stage to stand next to John, and they have the one mic, and John's doing the lead part, and when they get to the chorus, they both sing the chorus at the same time. To me, Paul McCartney and John Lennon doing facing the mic on an angle and singing singing together, that is the classic Beatles picture. Like when I think of the Beatles, that's what comes to mind. Those guys standing there and singing like that. The next song is "Act Naturally," which I wasn't even aware this was a Beatles song. I used to hear Buck Owens and Roy Clark do this on that TV show called Hee Haw, and it just never entered my mind that this was a Beatles song. And it may not have been a Beatles song originally. It may be in somebody else's that they covered, because they did do covers in that time period. Anyways, "Act Naturally." It's introduced by Paul, and this is the only shot in the concert that Ringo does a lead part on. He does the lead part, and then him and Paul do the kind of chorus together. And yeah, pretty well-known song. So then we move to the number 6, introduced again by Paul. A well-known song, as have just about every one of them so far. Can't Buy Me Love, sorry. This is the first song by Paul doing lead vocals here. And he does pretty much the whole song. Like, there's no backing vocals. There's no chorus or anything. Well, he does both chorus and lead. So it's the first song of that nature on the concert. And, this is where we get to hear Paul's voice uninterrupted by others. So really, really good track. Then they go to "Babies in Black," which is a song I'm not as familiar with. I may have heard it before, but I didn't know of it. And it's introduced by John. And then John and Paul do co-lead vocals, so they're both singing, again, angled to the mic, playing their instruments, and doing the Beatle look. I think it's the Beatle look. I think that's what it's what I always remember when somebody brings up the Beatles. I always think of the two of them standing on an angle, singing into the mic. So anyways, we go on to song number 7, introduced by John. Oh, sorry, we just did that one. Sorry, I'm one step behind the ball here. Okay, so the next one is introduced by John as well, and that, of course, is a legendary song, "Hard Day's Night," from the movie, their black and white movie, that is. John doing lead, Paul alternating lead, so John does a part, Paul does a part. This is something that the Beatles did. Not really, you don't see this as much in rock music. It's not as common as you would think it would be. There are other groups who've done it. I've seen it done before, but I always, when I see this, I think of the Beatles. When I see this co-lead stuff where one does part and then the other does a part, and then one does part and the other does a part. This also has, I think, the most iconic guitar solo for the Beatles. Which is, you'll know it when you hear it. You can't miss it. It's not very long, maybe 10, 12 seconds at the most. But George, this is maybe the greatest of his guitar solos, and definitely the most iconic one. So one I always remember. So then we go to the next one out, which is introduced by Paul. It's number 9. Is from their next movie, which is called Help. One of my favorite Beatles songs. Really difficult not to sing along to this song, man. It's difficult. I found myself getting into it right away as soon as they said. This is John on lead and George and Paul on the chorus. This is another iconic view of that I think the Beatles set up, where you have one guy doing lead and the other two doing the single. I used to see this with Kiss all the time, where Paul would be singing and Gene and Ace would be doing the vocals, or Gene would be singing and Paul and Ace would be doing vocals. They took that straight from the Beatles. There's no doubt about it. So you've got that. So the last song they did of the night, and they only did 10 songs, and those 10 songs last a half an hour. Can you imagine paying all that money, going to a rock concert today, and the lead act, and in their case, they were the only act. There was no other act. They came on and performed for a half hour and left. It was, and nobody was unhappy because they got to see these legendary guys for even a half an hour. You just don't see that now. Now it's like 2 hours, and if bands played for an hour and leave the stage and they don't have a backup band, there'd be people throwing things at the stage. But not at this concert. Okay, so the intro for the last song was done by Paul. He also did the help one. I think I forgot to mention that. It's I'm Down, with Paul on lead and George and John on the chorus. The main part here is that George is playing guitar, standing on the left side of John, who's playing the piano, and he does the elbow across the piano, and it's just the beginning of so many things. They were first to do so many things, and I'm not saying there wasn't other people doing this, but nobody was putting it on the map like these guys were. Okay, so there you have it. That's the concert live at Shea Stadium. Maybe one of the greatest energy-wise concerts I've ever seen. If you haven't seen it, please do yourself a favor and see it. I know it's dated, like very dated. I think it's in black and white, actually. Yeah, I think it was. It was in black and white. Very dated. The music is very simple. Of course, they were a pop rock band for the first probably 6 or... Yeah. No, not maybe that much. Maybe... Well, they started in 58, and then they got big in 62. So probably the last 4 years they were big up until about 66, and that's when they started to change. But, when you see this concert, it just reminds you of how much of an impact they had. And they were part of the British invasion to North America at one point. They came over, all those bands, and played. But the Beatles were, of course, the leaders, even though the Stones and the Who were big names as well. But those were the main. The Beatles were the main guys. There was no doubt about it. So if you're a Beatles fan, you gotta love this. And if you're not a Beatles fan, you should see this, if for no other reason, to see what kind of an impact they had. So I hope you've enjoyed this video tonight. And if you did, please like and subscribe. Tell me your feelings about this concert. Was there stuff I missed? Was there something you think that was noteworthy that should have been mentioned? Let me know. I'm interested in this part. You got to remember, I was barely alive at this point. And I missed, by the time I got into music, the Beatles were already history, unfortunately. So anyways, I really enjoyed watching this video. I really enjoyed making this video. And it gives some Beatle love back for Beatlemania. So, again, have a good Friday night. Enjoy your live experience. Prog Monster saying goodbye. Good night.